Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're taking a look at the latest DLC for Europa Universalis 4, The Golden Century. Before I dive in, I want to mention that I was given a review key by Paradox, for which I'd like to thank them, but that of course does not affect my opinion in any way, as I'm pretty sure you'll find out shortly. Now if you'd like to pick up the DLC for yourself, I'll provide a link under the eye at the top right corner of the screen and in the description down below. Hopefully I can find some affiliate links, so as you buy through those links, you'll actually be able to support the channel as well if you'd like. Now, it's been a very busy year for EU4, but no busier than usual with 3 DLCs releasing in what feels like relatively quick succession. Golden Century, which includes the Golden Century content pack, focuses on the Iberian Peninsula and Maghreb, with a few more global changes as well. As the third immersion pack for EU4, the DLC is somewhat narrow in scope by design, and its price is fittingly set at $10. But is Golden Century worth its weight in gold, or is it worth the wait instead? There are a couple of free changes that are coming alongside this update, and though they aren't technically part of the DLC, I do want to point out that there are some pretty big changes to the map on the Iberian Peninsula, in the Maghreb region, and the Spanish Main, as well as large parts of South, Central, and North America. There are new regions, new releasable nations, new events, an unoccupied Tenerife, and new strategic provinces, such as the one that cuts through the Atlas Mountains. Map updates are always nice to see, and these do offer some freshness to the regions in question, and there's a chance we'll see more updates to these regions in the future. Remember though that these are free updates, so you don't actually have to consider them as a part of the DLC and the cost that's going into buying the DLC. So moving on from that, we're seeing a few new mechanics and some changes to some existing features, and they range from some pretty great new ways to play the game to just a few additional buttons to click on. It was honestly a bit of an emotional roller coaster reviewing this DLC. Let's start with the highlights. Pirate Republics. This is by far, in my opinion, the best thing to come out of the Golden Century. Pirate Republics are a new form of government that comes into existence in a few different ways, as a custom nation, through historical events, or by using a decision that small island and Maghrebi nations can take. Historical pirate republics can come about on the Barbary coast, on Madagascar, in the East Indies, and of course in the Caribbean. One of the most easily accessible options in 1444 outside of a custom nation is the Sumatran monarchy of Palembang. While they get the option to hoist the black flag as a decision, much like other island and Maghrebi nations, they actually have a historical event pop up shortly after they start, allowing them to adopt the glorious government type of the Pirate Republic. Pirate Republics have a fair bit going for them to make them an interesting play experience. They've got their own mission trees to pursue, with each branch being fairly varied and flavorful, especially with the description text. They have their own factions as well, each offering their own benefits and their own ways of gaining influence, and they also have their own ideas, though Palembang sticks to its Sumatran ideas that it starts with. Finally, unique government reforms are also available, and they actually end with a rather somber option to put the black flag away for good. It's almost like a sad parallel to growing up, finally having to give up on your hopes and dreams of just having some fun and going drinking with the lads every once in a while, instead realizing that there are bills to pay and life isn't about having fun. Honestly, as somebody that likes to find a way to add some character to every game and playthrough that I have, I like how the Pirate Republics are executed for the most part, and I'm glad that there is an option to basically start as one in 1444, raiding coasts regardless of religion, plundering, sailing the seas, and living the pirate's life. Hell, once you're a pirate, the restrictions to hoisting the black flag no longer apply, so you can actually make an entire pirate nation that owns massive tracts of land. There's definitely room for improvement. The 3-faction system is always kind of lackluster, I guess. They're fairly easy to manage with monarch points and some simple button clicking. Raiding can be quite a pain, especially on the receiving end, and even while going out raiding, there's a lot of micromanagement involved. It feels like busy work. And the fact that these pirate republics basically act as regular nations in all but a few ways is quite the detriment, actually. Adding the option to play as a pirate is very hot right now, and while I'm not a fan of comparing design philosophies between games and companies, I find that there are examples out there that allow for a very, very different approach when playing as pirates, and that extra icing is missing on this cake. Still a decent experience, and with historical figures possibly appearing in your playthrough, there's fun to be had as well. I just wish it had dug a little deeper, and if that's outside the scope of an immersion pack, then perhaps Pirate Republics should have been saved for a time when they'd get the unique flavor they deserve, at least in my opinion. Beyond that, it is nice to see mission trees and ideas getting some touch-ups as well. Spain has a new mission tree that follows Spanish historical overseas expansions, including the ownership of California, Florida, and the Philippines. These can be pursued by all but Aragon once they form Spain, and Castile gets a bit of a jumpstart of the mission tree at the beginning. Aragon, meanwhile, is focused on dominating the Mediterranean Sea, spreading across southern France, to Italy, over to Greece, around Anatolia and Egypt, all the way back to Maghreb. Portugal is also seeing a very large mission tree that focuses on overseas conquests as well. South and Southeast Asia, Brazil, parts of Arabia, and Africa are all the focal points of various missions. Morocco gets a mission tree that focuses on Maghrebi conquest and West African expansion, while also having eyes to the west, with Brazil, Colombia, and the Caribbean as potential starting points of colonization. Now, I'm a big fan of the whole colonial angle when playing as any nation, really, so it's nice to see these missions reward that kind of behavior where it's absolutely fitting, and in some cases where it might be slightly ahistoric. Tunis has a fairly small mission tree focusing on the Barbary coast, while Granada and Andalusia have some pretty impressive mission trees of their own. Between all these changes and new national ideas for Spain, Castile, Morocco, Tunis, and Andalusia, we're seeing some fairly comprehensive changes here. They undoubtedly took a lot of time from a mission design perspective. Again, I consider this whole section of new missions, ideas, and decisions, in some cases, to be a highlight, mainly because it adds some new flavor, and that's what an immersion pack is supposed to do. Unless I'm horribly mistaken, it's supposed to add more depth in a very specific part of the world. But outside of pirate republics and some great new mission trees and national ideas, everything else is fairly simple as far as mechanics are concerned. Let me get this out of the way first. Yes, it's nice to see the new visuals for Iberian armies and Iberian and Berber ships, and the new music is also fantastic, but I've never played EU4 with a primary focus on the audio-visual experience. It has always done the job for me. It's well enough executed, but the addition of more in these categories is not my biggest concern when it comes to DLC. It's a nice extra, but it really doesn't affect my opinion on the price point. Holy Orders are literally just another set of buttons that give one buff or another. As long as you control all the provinces in a state, and as long as it is a state, you can establish one of three holy orders: the Jesuit, the Dominican, or the Franciscan, and their Muslim equivalents. They are all, depending on the situation, good choices. There's no downside to picking any one other than the fact that it's a permanent decision and you'll miss out on the benefits of the order you didn't pick. Typically, I found that the decision boiled down to one thing: where do I want the extra development? Tax, production, or manpower? If anything, I found establishing holy orders to be more of a chore than anything else, and frankly, an entirely forgettable experience. There should be more weight to establishing the holy orders. More effort should be necessary to reap only positive results, no matter how small those positives might be. I'd hope for a more challenging experience before, during, or after establishing a holy order, but there was none to be found, and so it did just boil down to clicking, I guess, 3 buttons. You have to pick the province, go over to the state menu, and then click which holy order you want. Yeah, 3 clicks at most. 2 on average if you already have the state view open for some reason. So 3 on average, 2 sometimes. Anyway, Minority Expulsion is a more interesting button to click. It really adds some character to a playthrough, and again, I'm a big fan of character when I'm playing games. So if you're a fan of role-playing like I am, it certainly is enjoyable, and outside of that, it has its uses from an empire management perspective as well. It lets you colonize the new world by sending a minority population over from any of your territories. Very important to understand, this is only for new world colonization. Now, this guarantees the culture and religion in this new colonized area will be that of the minority population that was sent over, and it also guarantees extra development when the colony is actually fully established and becomes self-sufficient, and it also lets you get rid of the people that you don't like occupying your neighborhoods back at home. Now, while there is a diplomatic point cost similar to the culture conversion cost of the region from where the minorities are being expelled, the positives will often outweigh the negatives. It basically becomes another way of doing the same thing, with the added benefit of reducing tension at home or colonizing new regions with cultures that are accepted but minorities at home. I definitely had some weird moments of decision making when playing as Spain. I'd like to send the Muslims from my Maghrebi conquests over, but do I really want a new province in the New World to not be one of my accepted cultures and faiths? It was interesting. It did boil down to just a couple of button clicks at the end of the day again. Once more, I would have liked to see more impact, more trouble being brewed by, sending all these minorities off. I just wish there was more of a challenge rather than having to click a few buttons and really just accelerate the colonization process. That's all I saw it as. It did help out back at home with getting rid of minorities here and there, but at the end of the day, it didn't feel like too much of an impact outside of what I was putting in myself by setting on the mindset of a role player, basically. Now, flagships are a fairly simple addition as well. I was excited for them when they were first announced, but I can't help but feel a few tricks were missed here. Basically, when you go to build a flagship, you have to put in a pretty heavy cost and time investment, as is fitting. You pick the ship class, and you pick what 3 modifiers it's going to have from a decent-sized list. There are generic options for all nations, with some nation-specific options for the Portuguese, Spanish, Swedish, and Dutch flagships. So far, so good. The modifiers are different enough to ask for some time spent making a decision, and while those with tens of thousands of hours of gameplay might have an obvious combination or might be seeing some things as overpowered or underpowered, I found there to be a justifiable reason to pick most of the options made available depending on what I'd like to pursue. Unfortunately, you can only have one flagship at a time, and that means that unless you scuttle or sacrifice your flagship, you're not going to have the opportunity to upgrade with the times and the new needs of your growing empire. Beyond that, the fact that there can only be one is a bit of a bummer just in general. I was hoping to have multiple fleets led by a flagship each. Maybe if a nation could have 2 or perhaps 3, it would feel like there was more of an opportunity to create really specialized fleets and flagships. I do like the fact that they're named ships, and the concept is definitely one worth including. From an execution perspective, I would have hoped for more, but I suppose one can always hope for more. Apart from these major changes, there are quite a few small changes as well, relatively speaking. Naval barrages are artillery barrages, but from sea, and we're seeing idea groups getting some reworking as well. And during my time playing, I didn't feel like these had too much of an impact on my playtime, if I'm perfectly honest. Once more, they were buttons to click, or changes to old buttons, and I didn't pursue them or feel the need to pursue them in any way, shape, or form. So that tells me that while they might be interesting changes and they have their benefits, I never felt like they were actually getting in the way of my playthrough in either a positive or negative way, so I'm kind of opinionless when it comes to those factors. When it comes time for an overall judgment, many of you will already know that I am not a fan of numerical scores. I find them random and fairly arbitrary, often resulting in meaningless comparisons. I instead consider the price point and the enjoyment factor of any piece of media. Did I have fun with the Golden Century changes? Well, bit of a loaded question. All the free changes were great, they're free after all, and they add more to the game, can't complain. But when it comes time to putting the $10 down, I can't help but feel that there's some room for improvement, not just with Golden Century, but with the whole concept of an immersion pack. This one basically boils down to a few more buttons to click for modifiers, some new mission trees, some new idea groups, and pirate republics. If I'm completely honest, I feel like the mission tree updates, as great as they are, should be free. They are an improvement to an old change, not a new change in and of themselves. Maybe that's just me. I think the pirate republics are a great idea, and while they're well enough executed to at least a couple more playthroughs to the game, I feel like they could have been pushed a lot further to really embrace the themes and history of piracy. The Holy Orders are rather simple executions, which is unfortunate, and the minority expulsion, while a more interesting set of buttons to click, remains fairly simple at the end of the day as well. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like immersion packs simply do not deliver at the price point. And that's quite unfortunate. That's not to diminish the work though. I do think that it's all, well written, it's well thought out, it's well designed, but I would completely understand a reduced level of investment from Paradox for the price point that they're going to be selling these features at. I would personally much rather spend twice as much as a consumer and get much more fleshed out experiences with every DLC that releases. I often defend the Paradox DLC paradigm. I feel like for the most part they're quite interesting. Just take a look at Holy Fury, take a look at Megacorp. Big changes at an acceptable price point. On the flip side, I can't find myself justifying even the $10 despite the quantity of changes being brought in because of the lacking I don't want to say quality, but the lacking depth. They're good changes, but they could have gone a lot further. You know what I mean? Now here's the thing, it does boil down to, is this a good or bad DLC? Is this a good or bad purchase? But not really, it's not a bad purchase, it's just a specific purchase. Do you want to play as an Iberian, Maghrebi, pirate, or New World nation in the near future? Yes? Then I think you're going to have enough fun and it'll be worth the price tag. Otherwise, you can honestly wait for a sale on this one, and that naval pun is entirely intended. I hope you guys enjoyed this review of the Golden Century DLC for Europa Universalis, and I hope you found it informative. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more strategy gaming content, including previews, reviews, let's plays, and more. A massive thanks goes out to all of my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel on a monthly basis, and a massive thanks goes out to you for watching. Till next time, cheers.